West Virginia never trailed and eventually able to pick up yet another victory as the West Virginia Mountaineers defeat a familiar foe, Bob Huggins' familiar coaching foe in Jamie Dixon and TCU. West Virginia now does not have a big game to look forward to as that game against Baylor has been dashed from the schedule. With all the schedule tweaks and the Mountaineers now going to Morgantown, they continue to surge as the West Virginia Mountaineers get yet another victory, this one over not a ranked opponent like the recent ones, but still you like to see the Mountaineers keep the winning way alive. And again, this one a game they never trailed, but certainly not a game they were perfect in by any means. I'm Mike Asti here, as this is a Mountaineer Hoops edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. And I am going to bring back a recent guest of mine, John Antonik, who is the director of content with the Mountaineers athletic department. So, John, appreciate you joining me for sure. I know you listen to Hugs, and we'll get to his takes here in a moment. But what can you take away from this win? It's a game they should have won. They did win. TCU made it a little closer at times towards the end, but they do end up with a comfortable victory. As I said, they never trailed in the game. Culver stepped up and once again continued to be a double-double machine, but McBride faltered. I'd imagine Huggins did not in any way feel this team was perfect, or was he very excited about the win? Nonetheless, it is a victory, and it no longer was a trap game, but still a win for the Mountaineers now with a few days off and going home instead of the original plan of staying in Texas. So what does that do to change the plans of the Mountaineers?
Well, first of all, it was a win. It was a road win, 6 straight league road wins, which is pretty impressive, particularly for a team that couldn't win on the road last year. So I think that's a takeaway. I think the other takeaway is they get a couple of days off, and they need it. I mean, right. McBride's pretty beat up. Huggins mentioned that a little bit on the postgame show. He's even considering maybe giving him 2 days off of just film. And so you could see that a little bit tonight. But the other guys did step up. And I thought a big basket in the game was the one McCabe got with 8 minutes to go. They were kind of going through those lulls there where they weren't scoring. And that basket I thought was really important for West Virginia. And then, of course, the one Deuce hit there with about 1:30 to go. Those were the two big baskets. But missed shots, missed free throws. I think Jamie was playing a little hack-a-shack there on some of West Virginia's poor free throw shooters to try to get some possessions. But, again, they were able to make enough plays to win an 8-point game on the road.
They win an 8-point game on the road. Yeah, that's something never to sneeze at, especially in the Big 12 with how competitive it's been in general, but certainly this year. And Bob Huggins and the Mountaineers know the schedule can change every time they wake up in the morning, and that's what ends up happening this morning. I almost didn't believe the initial reports, but then it just, of course, that's the way of the season, and they end up being accurate. John Antonik, again, Mike Asti here. The Mountaineers get a 74-66 win over TCU. Bob Huggins, 997, so he's approaching 900, or 897, approaching 900. Maybe one day the 9 will be in front there, almost to 1,000. Doesn't seem like he's quitting anytime soon, so you don't know. But 897, almost to 900. Few games left on the season, so we'll see if he can get to there in the regular season, maybe even being able to do that at home. Now, John, in this game, it was to a team that's not a ranked team that's had an up and down year, but was it simply that the Mountaineers didn't hit shots and maybe are tired, or is there something that TCU and Jamie Dixon did, Jamie Dixon knowing Huggins very, very well, that maybe could be game film for these future Mountaineer opponents?
Well, they played them physically, which is how Kansas State's going to play West Virginia on Saturday. So I think that maybe bothered them a little bit. And again, I think their strategy was to try to put the poor free throw shooters to the line to try to steal some possessions. TCU is a young team, and Nembhard is their big scorer, and also too they get some points from Samuel, who played pretty well tonight. But, this is a team, TCU, that's still trying to find itself. They got off to a really good start in the season. They've really struggled of late. I think they've lost 8 of 10 now since they got off to that really good start.
Right.
It's a team that's struggling. I think he's trying to find something there. And again, I think his thought was, okay, let's try to make this ugly and try to stay in the game and maybe try to steal one at the end. And obviously it didn't work.
No, it did not work. Although, again, he did make it tight for a while that maybe had some Mountaineer fans concerned.
They do score in bunches, and that's been their deal all year.
Yeah.
When they lost that game on Saturday, they couldn't score. They didn't score for the last 5 or 6 minutes against K-State, one of the worst teams in the Big 12. And so, I think all those things were kind of playing into the way Dixon went about it tonight. Dixon's a good coach, and he knows how to win.
Sure.
And he's got a young team. And again, I think some of those things were working against him tonight.
Yeah, for sure. Jamie Dixon, definitely a good coach. The track record at Pitt certainly it was great, to say the least. Didn't get to a Final Four, but did pretty much everything else. And now back home at TCU, and high expectations there. But I think everyone around that program realized there was a lot to build up. So it's going to be a roller coaster ride, as it's been from last to this year. Last year, thinking there was some hope. This year, not so much. But you never know with a COVID season and a pandemic-ridden season. 74-66, the Mountaineers with a win over Jamie Dixon and the TCU Horned Frogs. John Antonik with the Mountaineer Athletic Department there, the Director of Content with WVU. Mike Asti here on Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Now, John, do you think was there anything different in terms of strategy in this game? And Huggins been taking it game to game, so the answer is probably no. But anything different in this game with the fact that Baylor game is not happening? Do you think Huggins, if he knew there was a quick turnaround to Baylor, the biggest game of the year, he would have done anything different in terms of maybe even if he had a lead comfortable, he would have sat Culver, sat McBride more? No? Is it just game to game for Huggins?
I don't know about strategy-wise. I think maybe somewhat to some degree, maybe substitution-wise. He mentioned he wanted to try to rest McBride a little bit, and he did play him off the ball a little bit more in the second half to give him a break from handling the ball. But as far as strategy goes, I don't think he was trying to withhold anything to maybe spring something on Baylor. That point drop he always looks for an alternate defense or two besides man-to-man to throw in there to try to slow teams down. And he did use that point drop again, and he uses it with Gabe, who plays it really well. Gabe, again, you look at his line, and there's really nothing there that you go, whoa. But he played a great game. I mean, he had deflections. He got defensive rebounds. There are things that he does that really mean a lot to a team, kind of like Nate Adrian a few years ago. Nate was the guy that really just ignited everybody. And Gabe is that kind of player, and you need that kind of guy on your team. I mean, Gabe, I looked at his line here, and it's all zeros except for the 4 rebounds.
Right.
Here he was +5. So that kind of gives you an idea of what he gives to the team. And Derek, who was 18 and 14, was only +3. So those are your two big, and so that's kind of what you get there. But no, I don't think as far as strategy goes that played any role. Huggins never looks past the game he's playing. That's why he's won 897, and he would have done what he could to win this game, and then would have gone back and figured out what they would have tried to do to beat Baylor. Now they don't have to do that. They get on an airplane, they come back to Morgantown. He'll probably give them a day off, probably give them a light day the next day, and then get ready for Kansas State on Saturday.
It is a break the Mountaineers probably can use, although for the fans, they're probably a little disappointed, maybe even Huggins secretly, that you're not going to get the immediate test against the number 2 Baylor Bears. While they've been cold, they're still one of the best teams in college basketball. That'll be interesting. You'll still get to see that game, just not right away. And maybe you'll make the Mountaineers even better going into that game because, again, they've dealt with a gauntlet. And then I actually had you on right before that gauntlet of a schedule, really how important that schedule could be, because that could ruin a year or ramp up the year. And the Mountaineers going 3-1 in the gauntlet, 4-1 in their last 5 games. So 3-1 against those ranked teams, and that one loss being by 1 point to a top 10 team. So the Mountaineers certainly have dealt with the adversity, whether it be losing a player, losing games, having a schedule turned around, having to revamp the lineup, and then having that gauntlet of a schedule because of all that, which will preview a future show of mine that I'm going to release soon. Why this 897 for Huggins, Hall of Fame coach, this year might be his most impressive coaching job with everything that he's had to deal with for sure. And it's definitely been more game to game this year than ever before. And it usually always is game to game for him. But speaking about the individual performances in this game and that stat sheet, Sherman 23 ends up as a leading scorer. Culver 18. He ends up once again being that force that he's been recently as he's really become the MVP of this team. But before we get to who did well in this game, McBride once again struggling. He hit that big shot against Texas Tech, but really outside of that shot since the year turned, he's not been nearly as impactful as he was in 2020, and he's not been nearly as efficient. Yes, 11 points. He was in single digits most of the game and ends up 4 for 12. Once again, not an efficient spread for him. What do you think the issue is for McBride? And number two, can this team make a deep run and go to a Final Four like some are now saying without McBride playing better?
Oh, he has to play better, but I think the deal is the turf toe. I mean, he's playing with a bad foot. And go down. I know you're looking at the stats there, but go all the way to the last column.
I see it.
Yeah. He was West Virginia's second most efficient guy besides Sherman. I don't know who he was guarding, but apparently he did better on the guy that he was on than the guy guarding him. So even though he only had 11,
overall as a player, he was efficient, just the shooting wise.
Right. At the 5 assists, I mean, there was some other things I think Deuce did tonight that were really good, particularly getting the ball to Sherman, getting the ball to McNeil, distributing the ball, also getting the ball inside to Derek. So there are things that Deuce does during games, even when he doesn't score, that helps West Virginia win. Sure. And I would rather have him at 4 and 12 on the floor shooting than on the floor. That's for sure.
Yeah, he absolutely is doing a lot more than maybe the stat sheet says. Absolutely. And he certainly can still impact the game. However, I guess I'll ask it this way. Can the Mountaineers make a deep run if he's not shooting better? Because I get that he's so much more involved in the team, but the reason why, let's be real, the reason why people were talking about him as maybe the best player in the Big 12 back in December, the reason why I did a show that he deserves more national recognition is because he was shooting the lights out and he was putting together 9 for 12 days or 10 for 13. And the assists and the rebounds were still there. It's not like those other stats weren't there. Now he's bringing you those numbers, but he's no longer shooting. And the 11's kind of misleading because he had 7 until the last few minutes of the game. So it's really a poor shooting night for him, and it's been poor shooting nights for him recently. You have that big shot in there. There is that 30-point game, but overall it's not been enough consistently. Maybe he's injured, but that could then be a concern is he going to get healthy enough to be who he used to be? And is this game plan for the Mountaineers that's been working recently going to work in the NCAA tournament? Because this game plan is clearly Culver as the focal point of this offense, which is completely switched from McBride just 2 months ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's inside out. And the thing too is it because they play 4 out now, that, Bridges is the key to that because he took Sheboy's place in the lineup. Bridges is a stretch guy. So you got 4 guys out, which gives Derek more room to operate inside. The key for Derek is identifying those double teams and kicking the ball out. He struggled with it a little bit tonight, particularly when they would double down on him and he would deflect the ball or knock the ball away. But you're right about McBride. He's going to have to play well. In the NCAA tournament, I think a lot of it's guard play anyway. The guard play is what's going to determine how far you go. And with all those guys, they're going to have to string 6 together. Whoever wins the national championship or gets to the big game has got to string 6 of those games together. And so far, I'm not sure other than Gonzaga, and we don't know about Baylor because I just saw Baylor was losing at halftime at Iowa State. Now, I don't know what the latest score is there. I haven't checked it since, but obviously the time off hasn't served them well. And so again, whoever it is, whoever makes the run has to string 6 together. And that's
as we speak here, 65-64, under 5 minutes left, and I'm a little slow here. So we'll see. Yeah, it's not served Baylor well to have to. I would imagine that there's no coach in the country, and Huggins even talked about this in January. You don't want 3 weeks off of playing. And when you're dealing with COVID, people don't realize that doesn't even include practice. So they're just off. So
Right.
that's pure rust. You don't know if they're even working out and the steps they're taking instead of being on a treadmill and just walking around their house or apartment. So it's understandable. I don't know what that will do in terms of hurting them in the rankings. The Mountaineers get a win over a non-ranked team. Baylor has been off so long. Maybe the committee won't think that that's that big of a deal, but still, yeah, right now the Mountaineers are the hottest team in the conference.
One thing to point out about Baylor being off is not only the sharpness or whatnot, it's game conditioning. There is a big difference between game conditioning and just regular playing, and that's probably showing up tonight.
It very, very much could be showing up tonight. Absolutely. And Iowa State, not a good team by any means. Baylor has been one of the dominant teams all season. We talked about comparing them and Gonzaga to the Mountaineers and that being the true test. I'm sure Huggins wants to see it, and we're going to see it. There probably was no need for both of those games with everything dealt with in the pandemic. So it kind of makes sense to have that moved around. John Antonik. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, look at it now. Now West Virginia's got four games in 7 days, but
it's still
games
stacked.
in Morgantown.
It's a little different than what it was when they had that gauntlet schedule where they're moving around the country. Having that in Morgantown's a big deal.
Well, I think the point that Huggins made about that is that, they were going to play 3 games last week, or 3 games this week, 3 games next week going into the conference tournament. He says, how can you have a conference tournament or have a legitimate conference tournament when you got teams that you're asking to do that 3 games in a week, 2 straight weeks before you go into your league tournament? So that's one of the thought processes in why the game against Baylor was canceled and switched back around. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it's going to be a flourish. I mean, you're talking about 4 games and 7 games, then go out to the conference tournament, and the teams that play in the conference tournament that reach Friday will stay there even if they lose, and then move on to the NCAA tournament if they go. And so teams are going to be on the road for a while. This is going to be an interesting march for all those teams that qualify for the conference tournament, then move on to the NCAA tournament because of the COVID quarantine, all that situation, travel party, all that stuff. Going to be really interesting.
It's going to be interesting to say the least, and maybe the Mountaineers are prepared with the weirdness they've dealt with this year and having to move around the country and having games get dashed all the time. So maybe that's a benefit, and obviously having a Hall of Fame coach certainly can help. The Mountaineers win this one 74-66 over TCU, so another victory for the Mountaineers. They don't have Baylor coming up in a couple days. They do go back home. That is a rest. I'm sure they are going to be able to utilize to help them, and they will still see Baylor before things close out here for this season. So we'll still get that test depending on what type of Baylor team it is, though. They might be coming in with their heads down, but again, they are certainly shaking off rust from being off. Now, we talked about McBride, and we talked about his struggles, at least shooting and needing to do more despite still impacting a game. What do you think jump-started Culver so much? Because obviously he has been able to be a force in the past, but not as consistent. And just fortunately for the Mountaineers, during McBride's offensive slump, I guess you could say, Culver has taken the bull by the horns and just really become now arguably the MVP of this team, almost giving you the whole Culver that you wanted to see the past year or so. Is it just that he finally came into his own and Huggins just gets the most out of his guys, or is there something you've noticing that Culver's doing now that has made him so consistent and a walking double-double?
Well, I think all those things. I think the fact that he's played so many games, he's an experienced player now. He's in his 3rd year. Interestingly enough, Huggins mentioned this on the pregame show. I happened to catch it. He only had 5 rebounds against Texas, and apparently his mom called him and said, "Derek, I can get 5 rebounds." It kind of stuck the needle in him a little bit. But, hey, and so he ended up getting 14 tonight. But I do think that again, it's a matter of a guy that's kind of coming into his own. He scored 18, and he was 6 of 12 from the floor. And so of those 12, I would say probably 10 were close to the basket. There were a couple, I think he took a couple of jump shots. And had he made half or if he'd have made half the free throws that he missed, he would have had 22. So he's getting a lot of opportunities. And again, there is another guy I think that's going to have to to play well going down the stretch and into the postseason.
Absolutely, and he's done so, and he does have the ability to get easy points, and he does have the ability for this team to play inside out, which has been a change for the lineup, and he's had more pressure on him to do so since Oscar left. It's really become Culver needing to be that guy down low, and he's certainly been that. 18 points, 6 for 12, as you mentioned, 3 offensive rebounds, as that was a big stat in their favor in that first half, is dominating the glass offensively. 14 rebounds. They also win the rebounding battle again, and I'm sure one thing Huggins points to as well, the recent win streak has also been part of dominating the glass. They've been great rebounding wise in most of these recent wins, and we're even okay in that 1 point loss to Oklahoma, which is the only thing that derailed this from being even a longer win streak here. John, Sherman, 23. Another player that's really emerged. He gives you 23. That's bench production. It's been up and down between him and McNeil in terms of who's in the starting lineup and who's on the bench. Sherman actually had a 25-point game a few games ago where many thought, well, he's going to solidify his spot somehow in this starting 5. He then misses a game. McNeil comes out of nowhere. He ends up being the leading scorer. Who would have ever thought you'd have those two back-to-back leading scorers in games and those teams win those? And now it almost seems like, despite Sherman wanting to get that starting nod, it almost seems like he's played so well off the bench since McNeil took his spot that now he's locked into being this bench scorer. But is this the best Mountaineer lineup? Do you think they now figured it out with Sherman now being that top 6th man offensively, or could this still switch off? Because again, like Huggins has coached these game to game, and every game is different, certainly has provided different lineups game to game. So we could see a different one next game possibly.
Maybe. I think he'll probably stick with the lineup that he used.
Okay.
Because I think he likes to, what he always would talk about is that Boston Celtics pop. He likes to have somebody come off the bench and give you offense, energy. He looks for that. And Taz is the guy that's capable of doing that. And I think Taz has embraced that role. There was something that was a couple of weeks ago. He talked about wanting to be the Big 12 6th man of the year. So that's in his mind, thinking about that. But isn't it nice to have a guy like that can give you 23, or a McNeil who can give you 16 in the second half? And it was really McNeil that ignited that run in the second half against Texas and won that game. I mean, he scored 13 of those 16 points in about an 8-minute stretch when West Virginia took that game. So those are guys that can score in bunches. They're confident. They're confident shooting the ball, and doesn't always go in, but that doesn't bother them. And you got to have that.
It does put a lot of pressure, though, with this lineup on Sherman to be the bench scorer, because he has 23, 2 from McCabe, and then that's it offensively, and that's kind of been the recent situation. Again, like we talked about with McBride, when he's not scoring, he can impact the game otherwise. And you mentioned earlier what has been going on with the rest of the Mountaineer bench in terms of impacting the game. But is it a concern that it's really only one guy who can score off the bench with this current lineup?
Well, not really. And again, one guy we didn't talk about who I thought played really well was Jalen Bridges.
Yeah, 9 points, 4 for 4 from the field.
Yeah, and there was a stretch there where I think he hit 7 straight points. And those were important points to help West Virginia build that lead. And he's growing game by game. You can just see a little bit more growth and development, more comfort out there on the floor. And he's really talented. I mean, he is a really talented in-state guy, a guy that wants to be at West Virginia, a guy that's proud to be a Mountaineer, and a guy I think that if he sticks with Huggins, which which I know he will, Huggins will make him a really good player. The guys that stay with Huggins, okay, and the guys, that listen to what he tells them, usually turn out well. And that's
he gets the most out of his players, absolutely.
Right.
And generally speaking, it's not 5-star recruits.
That's not true. I mean, he had those at Cincinnati, and
Well, I'm talking about with West Virginia, 20-some years ago. Sure.
It's okay if you listen to me and not maybe an AAU coach or somebody that's got maybe a different idea. The guy knows what he's doing. And I think
Yeah.
the players that stick with him and pay attention to what he's telling them and the things that they work on, generally speaking, things turn out well for him.
Yeah, and he coached Kenyon Martin back at Cincinnati, so he's coached NBA-minded players going into college, right? But at West Virginia, it's not like many people were thinking Javon Carter was going to be a legit NBA player prior to coming to West Virginia. Deshaun Butler was able to build himself up and become what he became and lead the Mountaineers to a Final Four. So he gets the most out of his guys. If they have an NBA opportunity, he's going to get him there. If they don't, he'll still get him to a great college career. And you're seeing that now with McBride, with Culver. He's getting the most out of these players where they're having better years as they get older. And the one fortunate thing of not having a bunch of diaper dandies, as Dickie V would say, is he does get these players to stick around for a few years, which helps the team and also gets them to be better than they would when they first get there. Huggins certainly a great coach to coach you up, to say the least. Now, getting past this game, because it was a game that should not have been in doubt, and it was not. They won the game. And there's certainly things to take positively and things to take negatively from this game, but they're going to move on here. Kansas State coming up. This is now going to be some makeup games. They're on the schedule. As we mentioned, Baylor bounced out. They're still going to play Baylor later on. What do you make of this remaining schedule for the Mountaineers in terms of, obviously, you want to play well and you want to win and you want to keep that top 10 ranking, but what do you want to see out of this team headed into a conference tournament, headed into March Madness? Huggins talks about really at this point in the year wanting to see the team play well more than just stack wins, because once you know you're in the tournament, it's just about then playing well, and they now know they're in the tournament. So what do you want to see the rest of the way, and how do you kind of predict these matchups to go? Baylor, the only ranked team left on the schedule. Baylor right now struggling and coming off of being so cold for a few weeks, but it's never easy in the Big 12, and the Mountaineers season is so much in front of them of what they can achieve.
Well, I think this team plays well together. I think they've developed an identity. I think all the guys know what their roles are. You're this deep into the season. You just want to see them continue to shoot the ball well. They do pass it better than they did at the beginning of the year. That's something he's talked about all year. They had 19 assists today. You want to see them continue to share the ball, move the ball around. And again, I think the 4 out, that's the style of play that everybody knows how to play today. So whatever rank they came up through, AAU, high school, whatnot, that seems to be the style. So that's the style that's most comfortable for these guys offensively. But again, I think you just want to see them continue to shoot the ball well, pass the ball, share it. And these 4 games, Oklahoma State's got some terrific players. They're a dangerous team. Huggins has talked about Kansas State being a young team. They're a tough team. Don't always they haven't won a lot, but they've given some people some problems. Right. TCU, again, you got them coming back to the Coliseum, and then you're going to finish. Then you got Baylor, and again, Baylor's up now 70-68 with 124. So we'll see if they hang on there. Their last loss was to West Virginia at the Coliseum last year. That's the last basketball game they lost. And so we'll see. We'll see what. But again, you're right. You want to be playing well going into the conference tournament. I'm a little concerned about the number of games that they've got to play getting into the conference tournament, and then if they have a deep run in the conference tournament, what that's going to leave them when the NCAA tournament comes around. Okay. You play well, and I can remember one year when West Virginia, when this was back when Catlett coached, and Damian Owens got hurt, and they ended up losing a bad game to Rutgers in the conference tournament. Everybody's like, oh, man. But it was really a blessing in disguise because it gave them that time off to get rested and get everybody healthy.
Right.
Made that run and did that. Sometimes it works that way. Other times you want to be playing at your peak and you want to keep going. So it's going to be interesting. This is going to be a really interesting couple of weeks coming up for sure.
Yeah, I think interesting is certainly the term of the season. And of course, back to 2010, the Bob Huggins Final Four year with the Mountaineers, you're seeing a conference championship and then going to the Final Four. So they've been able to go through it and then still go deep into the tournament. But this is a completely different team. And this is a year that I don't think anyone has ever had to really deal with before. That's definitely a thought, though, especially when you know you're in. And right, unless it's an embarrassing loss, you're getting probably a top 4 seed at the worst based on where you are now and what we're seeing projection-wise. They're generally getting a number 3 seed. I would probably say, unless they win out, which includes the conference tournament, I don't know if they can really improve upon that too much. They're certainly not going to get a 1 seed. So it's looking like a 3 or a 2. So maybe you wouldn't mind some time off. Like, how much does that really matter to go kill yourself for a bump in a seed and then you go ahead and lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament on a major upset? I don't think fans would leave with a great taste in their mouth, depending on what happens in the Big 12. So it is all about the NCAA tournament, a tournament that did not get to happen last year, and maybe a blessing in disguise also for this team to even be hungrier, because unlike this year, they were not playing well at the end of the season last year. So
actually, last year he thought they were poised to make a run. You remember they beat Baylor and then they shut
at the
down.
end. Yeah,
they had Oklahoma and they were eager to play Oklahoma. And as it turned out, Oklahoma has been kind of the thorn in West Virginia's side. The season that they're having. Again, and I think back to
and that's the 1-point loss in the recent games.
Right. That's the one loss in this streak here. So, and again, I think back to one of Huggins' best teams here was the team that lost to Stephen F. Austin. Those guys on that team thought that was the team that could make a run. And yet they come out, were flat, lost the game in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And you remember that team was a high seed, and there were a lot of people talking about that team making a run. So you just don't know. You don't know how it's going to all shake out. And again, I think it's just going to be an interesting couple of weeks to see how they deal with this schedule coming up Saturday through to the tournament.
Right.
What happens in the tournament, and then what happens when they get out to Indianapolis and they get in that bubble and they start playing in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and you just never know. You absolutely never know. You really don't even know who you're going to play or when the game's going to happen every time you wake up in the morning. So that's kind of this year, and everyone's kind of just dealing with it. The Mountaineers get the 74-66 win over TCU. They head now into that game against Kansas State in these makeup games, the rest of the schedule, with Baylor being bounced out, but they will play the Bears before they get into the conference tournament. John, I appreciate you joining me for sure. Any final words here on either what you saw from this game or moving forward? Obviously, we discussed a lot of it here. Culver played well again. McBride needs to do more shooting, but still can impact the game. They get Sherman bench production. They get Bridges to kind of be an unsung hero, and they take care of business. But there's still a lot in front of them. And this team, destiny is really in their hands. It sounds cliche, but that's the case. And there are people who feel this is a Final Four team. Nothing is guaranteed. You never know. But they've been playing like it recently. So we will see.
Yeah, well, you need some luck. There's no question about it.
Sure.
You need to have some good fortune go your way, and really they're getting it with the break in the schedule, the way it's broken down for them, the way they got to make these games up at the end. They are at home, they're in their beds, and then they may be on the road for a long time.
They might be. Yeah, and they also ended up being able to not have the negative of that break in January ruin their season, because it stacked the schedule and made it so difficult. But they've been able to – they won 3-1 in that gauntlet, and then now 4 in their last 5. So it has not been a problem like it maybe could have ruined a year. You need some luck to go far. You also need to avoid some bad luck, and the reason why the Mountaineers maybe didn't make it more than a Final Four in 2010 with Deshaun Butler getting hurt against Duke. So that's bad luck in that game. But probably would have went the same way regardless. The Mountaineers do get this victory, John. I definitely appreciate the time for sure. We'll talk to you again. And it's another victory for the Mountaineers. So once again, that was John Antonik, the director of content with the West Virginia Mountaineers athletic department there, joining me again. I had him on a few weeks ago before this schedule beefed up, and we talked about how important this recent stretch was for the Mountaineers. Again, they've been able to do really, really well, have played better than they were prior to this schedule being harder, kind of seizing the day and getting 4 out of their last 5, only loss being to Oklahoma with a 1-point loss, going 3-1 against those ranked opponents in what was supposed to be that schedule. Games being moved in and out of there, obviously, but still, they'll see Baylor in the future. Baylor right now struggling, and this Mountaineer team playing well, but not playing perfect. There are definitely things to improve upon, but still getting wins, and that's the most important thing. So again, thanks to John Antonik. Nobody's in a West Virginia encyclopedia like him. Certainly can harken it back to 30 years ago and connect the dots to this year. That's why I always love talking to him. Definitely appreciated that conversation, and the Mountaineers now will continue their winning ways, but I'm sure Huggins not yet fully satisfied. But a lot of hype around this team for sure. People are slurping the Kool-Aid. I'm tempted to go there with how well this team is playing and the fact that they are getting these wins against these teams now. But that Baylor game is going to be incredibly intriguing. And then to see what happens in that Big 12 tournament. And if that tires you out for the NCAA tournament, which is kind of what all matters, then it definitely matters the most in comparison between the two. That's it for this one. Stick with us here throughout the Now family of network. Go to WV Sports Now for all the post-game coverage here. Huggins Zoom press conference, as well as our post-game recap over there. WV Sports Now, Cody Nesper and company, bringing you that coverage over there at WV Sports Now. Find them on Twitter at WV Sports Now on Twitter, and also over there on Facebook. Hit that subscribe button. I say it every show, but I do mean it. It's free to do so. Smash that button. It'll get all of our content to you, and you'll get a notification whenever we do go live or any show gets released here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. You can follow us at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, and of course, follow me at Mike Asti 11 on Twitter. For John Antonik, again, the director of content with the West Virginia Mountaineers Athletic Department, for all of us throughout the Now family of networks, most notably WV Sports Now for this broadcast, and of course, for all of us at Pittsburgh Sports Live. The Mountaineers get another victory. The Mountaineers continue their winning ways. Were they perfect? No. Are they playing well? Yes. Are expectations there? Yes. Can they even be better? Yes. Is that actually a good thing with them winning right now? Abso-freaking-lutely. We will see how things unfold the rest of the season and then into that Big 12 tournament. But this Mountaineers team is playing well when you want them to play well, and they are surging at the exact perfect time.